All right, so as we come to the close of our epistemological journey, I want you to reflect back on some of the questions I presented you with at the very beginning of this exploration, and to consider whether or not any of the theories we've explored help you come to some answers to these questions that you can have some degree of confidence in. All right, so one question is, what is knowledge, and how is it different from belief? Do you accept Plato's definition of knowledge, that it's true, justified belief? And if so, at what point does a belief you have about reality qualify as knowledge to you? When do you feel like you have gone beyond just believing something to be true and feeling like you actually know it's true? What's the criteria for defining those two states of awareness, or those two states of mind, knowing something and believing something? What do you think you can acquire knowledge about? What can you know? And are there things that you can't know? Are there questions that just will never be able to be answered? And if we can acquire knowledge, how do we do it? How do we get it? Do we use our reason? Do we use our sense organs? Do we use some combination of those two things? And how do we know that we know what we say we know? Right? So there's times when I think to myself, I know this, and I know it. Well, how do I know that I know it? Okay? So think about these questions and reflect on some of the answers we've seen. Right? We've seen Plato and Socrates coming forward and saying, yes, of course you can have knowledge of reality. And here's how you do it. And they really rely on reason. You can, through the sheer force of reason, come to an understanding about the highest levels of reality, the realm of the perfect forms that exist in this intelligible realm. And you don't need to necessarily bother yourself with experiencing the material world. It's just a representation of a much higher reality that you should access through your reason. Don't rely so much on your experiences, because reality is not necessarily how it appears to be. And then you've got Aristotle coming in and saying, okay, nice try, guys. We're still friends, but you're high on this one. The highest levels of reality are not some abstract, intelligible, non-physical world. We can acquire knowledge about the world by having experiences of it, and we need to get our sort of hands in the dirt, and we need to figure things out and really get focused in on the reality we inhabit, the material world that we inhabit. And then you've got Descartes come along, and he says, I have knowledge, and I acquired this knowledge in a couple of different ways. Like Plato, like Socrates, I really relied on reason. And I just through the sheer force of reason, I came to the knowledge that I exist. And I know exactly how I exist. I exist as a thinking thing. That's the essence of who I am. I exist as the essence of who I am is a non-material thinking thing. And I arrived at that knowledge just by reasoning my way there. I also came to the conclusion that an all-powerful, all-good, all-knowing God has to exist by logical necessity, because I seem to have these ideas in my mind that I couldn't have possibly gotten from my experience of the world, these ideas of perfection, these ideas of substance or thingness. And so if I have these ideas in my mind that I couldn't have gotten from my experience, they must have been sort of put in me by whoever this creator was, who had access to these ideas that I couldn't possibly have had access to on my own. And then you have Leibniz coming forward and saying, rock on. Absolutely, Descartes. You're right. We can use reason to acquire knowledge about the universe, and about reality, and we can use reason to determine that this God that you argued in favor for has to exist by a logical necessity. And Leibniz says, and I can then further deduce what must be the nature of the world that we inhabit. It's got to be the best of all possible worlds, because the God that Descartes proved exists would only create the best of all possible worlds. So I have knowledge. And then you have Locke showing up on the scene and saying, chill, guys. Reason is not doing what you think it is. It's super important, but you've got to use it as a tool to acquire knowledge about the reality you're in, the reality you inhabit. And it's a physical one. It's a material one, and you can have experiences of this physical reality that will allow you to acquire knowledge about it. And then Berkeley shows up on the scene, and Berkeley says, you're right, Locke, we can acquire knowledge through our experiences. And you're right, Locke, Descartes was not correct when he said that he was born with certain ideas, that he had innate knowledge. But you're wrong, Locke, in thinking that we can have knowledge of this physical reality, or that there is a physical reality to acquire knowledge about, because we can't really prove with any certainty that physical reality actually exists. I would be safer just saying that some sort of ideal reality exists, that perceptions exist, sensations exist, ideas exist. And we know that. We don't know so much about this physical reality. So you see all these folks coming forward, and there's a bazillion others. We're just kind of taking a little slice here of some of the major figures here. But think about, do any of these answers that these folks are proposing to you, are any of them satisfying? Do you have confidence in some of their ideas more than others? Are there some of the ideas that these folks have offered that you think, no, that's dumb, I'm not rolling with that? And are there some ideas that you hear and you think like, that's interesting? Okay? Now, as you're trying to answer these questions for yourself, we're going to look at a fellow who did the same thing. He tried to answer them for himself. He looked at all of these and he said, I'm not sure I can buy any of this. So we're going to look at a very famous Scottish philosopher to round out our discussion of epistemology, David Hume. It's interesting, I don't know if they do it every year, but it's every couple of years, there'll be a survey that goes out of philosophy professors all over the West. I mean the western part of the world. And they'll have a listing of a huge listing of major philosophic figures over time. And they'll ask the question, which of these philosophers from the past do you think have ideas that continue to be relevant today? And by relevant, they mean they offered theories that are worthy of continuing to explore and entertain today. And David Hume always scores kind of the highest on this survey, that David Hume is regarded as remaining one of the most, if not the most, relevant earlier philosopher from the past. David Hume has had an interesting life. He was a major philosopher, but boy, he took a lot of grief in Scotland for his ideas. And he took a lot of grief for them because they were really controversial, particularly his ideas about religion. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that he was such a controversial figure that he was even denied an academic post because people just didn't like what he had to say, particularly about religion, as I said. Now, of course, that's changed. Now they have buildings named, universities named after him, buildings named after him, streets named after him. They call him St. David. He was apparently a really nice guy, and despite the fact that he pissed everybody off, he was generally regarded as a very friendly person who liked to play backgammon and think about things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of his evaluations of the different theories of knowledge that the folks we've been thinking about offered.